Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Storytime on Monday, and I promised you guys the story about the time I met a fairy. I don't really have any props today like I did spooky last time. I did bring up one of my little fairy dolls I made, but the fairy that I met didn't look quite like this though. So, on to the story. So I was 20 in college for a degree that I really didn't want or was interested in. It's something that my mother thought would be good for me to go into. Boring. Boring, boring, boring. Not for me. But I was going to college most of the time. Met some really nice people there, and one of them was a very creative guy. I'm going to refer to him as Hamilton. That was his name. Don't think he'll find this video, but if he does, hi Hammy. And he was really into Dungeons and Dragons. And I'd always been interested in it and heard about it and wanted to play. And so I bought the books and made a character, and he was like, okay, we're going to my friend's house and we're going to play this Friday. It's going to be all night. Well, I was still living at home and still subject to some rules. Even though I was 20, it wasn't my house, so I had a curfew. And I was to be home at midnight. Well, I didn't want to be home at midnight. So I did what everybody does when you don't want to state a curfew. I said I'm going to be at a friend's house spending the night. And so I went to this Dungeons and Dragons game. And I showed up and no one knew I was coming. He's like, oh, it'll be fine. I just, we'll just go and I'm sure it'll be okay. And I'm like, oh my God. I was not into meeting new people, and then to find out that these new people didn't even know I was going to be there, it was not good. Oh yeah, by the way, I vape, so what happened was I stayed there, and the DM was not interested in working me into the story. So I waited around about 2 hours, watched them play a little bit. It was probably getting on about 1 o'clock now. And what was I going to do? I couldn't go home because I had told my parents I was going to be out. I could possibly go home, around 6 or 7, but that was at least a 6-hour window. So I packed up my shit, got in my little car, and I drove to the nearest Denny's. Yeah, I was one of those. I parked at some poor waitress's table for 6 hours. Luckily, I bought food and stuff like that, so I didn't completely waste her time. But for those 6 hours, I read a book. It was some fantasy book, more than likely Mercedes Lackey. That's who I was into at that time. So I sat there and I read all these books and drank coffee and had like breakfast and lunch and dinner. And finally, I saw the sun start to come up. I was like, yes, I can go home. I could just say I just didn't sleep good. Maybe I had a fight with my friend. But anyway, I can go home and go to bed now. So I got up, paid my bill, left a fairly generous tip for the waitress that put up with me for 6 hours. And I started to leave Denny's. And that's when I saw him. Now, when I say fairy, I'm not talking about like the one I showed you or Tinkerbell. I'm talking about otherworldly beings, probably referred to as the good folk, the shining ones. You don't really refer to them as fairies or elves because they consider that a little bit rude. But this gentleman held the door open for me. And when I say he was a shining one, he shone. He was tall. What I would say looked to be in his 50s or 60s, but definitely kind of ageless. Smooth face, and he was just smiling at me. It was like he saw me and was just so happy to see me. He opened the door and said, "Good morning. I hope you have a good day today." And I looked up at him and I was just like, I just like stammered out, "Thank you." And I remember he had a cane and he was wearing, I don't know if it was actually gray tweed because I'm not a real big suit connoisseur, but it was a gray suit with a button-up shirt. He had a really well dressed for like about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. And it was just sunrise and he was standing there. I don't know, but he just definitely had this otherworldly look to him. And it just struck me as this was not a normal person. I say fairy because he had that certain mischievous twinkle in his eye, like he knew a secret that I didn't know. And I just sort of acknowledged him and walked out of Denny's, and I got halfway to my car before I realized I cannot not go back and talk to this guy. I don't know what possessed me, why I had to go back in, but I turned around and I just basically ran back into Denny's. And this was like no more than like a minute in between him saying good morning and me trying to go to my car. And I dashed back into Denny's and I looked around trying to find him and I couldn't find him. He wasn't there. Now I realize he was probably in the bathroom or he was probably sitting around somewhere. I mean, and what would I say to this guy if I actually went up and talked to him? But was he a fairy? I think so, maybe. He was definitely different, very interesting, and just kind of neat. And he definitely left an impression with me just by saying, a typical good morning. So, yeah, that's one of my stories about me meeting somebody that might have been a little bit magical and left a big impression on me. So there we go. Story time is over. Hope you enjoyed it. Next week, I think I'll tell a story that's not mine. I think I'll tell a story that is from my husband's. About him being stalked by a gnome. Yeah, he's been stalked by a gnome 3 or 4 times. So have you met a fairy? Have you met somebody that's left a magical impression on you? If you want to leave a comment or let me know what you thought about my little story, please do. And I'll see you next Monday with a different story, okay? Bye. Talk to you later.